The world is watching with their ears.
Paratopia, we're back again. And this one is, well, it's a little bit different. I think we've only ever done something slightly like this once with the Emma Woods, David Jacobs audio, but this isn't even exactly that. What we're going to be doing is going through an episode of the Joiner Report, that is Angelia Joiner's show, and I guess we're going to be listening, and we're going to be stopping and commenting on it. And essentially, it's an interview with Jim Penniston of the Bentwaters case. And in case anyone doesn't know what the Bentwaters case is, we'll get to that in a second. But basically, this is a case that that Jeff, you would say what? Do you still think it's a good case? You for most of your life in this, you've thought that this was a pretty solid UFO case.
Good evening, Jeremy. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm sorry, do I need to start that over?
No. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I've held Bentwaters Woodbridge in pretty high regard for being a really solid case. And certainly, I think over the years, its story has not wavered too awful much, depending on who you talk to. But I think Colonel Halt, Jim Penniston, those two guys are the ones that I see most often associated, at least in media, for me with this case. And both have stayed pretty consistent over the years. And I always thought it was a very good case. I mean, when it first came on to Unsolved Mysteries, although those many years ago, I think that was really the tipping point for that case when a lot of people became aware of it. And a lot of people started digging for more and uncovering documents. And, of course, since all that came out, the Halt memo has surfaced. And Colonel Halt's audio recordings from that night with his little handheld recorder have come out. So we've got a little bit more than what we did at the onset. And I always thought it was a very good case, yeah.
Jeff Ritzman, ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Ritzman.
Thanks for having me, Jer.
Thanks for coming on. So now, coincidentally, we'll put that in quotes because we don't really know. Jim Penniston, at the 30th anniversary of the Bentwaters crash, or whatever it is, Bentwaters, landing? I don't know what to call it. Case. Comes out with some new evidence. But before we get to that, just in case there are some new people listening, briefly tell people what happened during those 3 days. Briefly?
Wow. Briefly is not easy. I mean, I would encourage anybody to I mean, this is going to be ever so brief. Definitely to go on to, anywhere on their internet and look up the Rendlesham UFO case and read the whole story. Short of it is, you've got a joint military base over in Great Britain. Pretty unique situation for the base itself, and you can read more about all the logistics of the base and why it was there, and the connections to RAF and all of that. But essentially, guys at a guardhouse see lights in the woods. They said it looked like a light show going on out there, and some men went out to investigate what it was. They had to ask permission to go off the base because off the base you're in UK territory and no longer under the United States off the base. So weapons were left behind, or so I've read. And they went to investigate. One of those men being Jim Penniston, and the other being Mr. Burroughs. That's two of the three, I believe, if it was three. But they came upon a craft. In particular, Penniston has told this story a lot, that he came upon a craft that was actually fairly small as UFOs go, 9 foot 8 foot in length, somewhere in there, triangular or diamond shaped, with an appendage on the top and some, I don't know, I guess you call them hieroglyphic, but they're kind of more like just, I don't know. You can't really describe them as hieroglyphic because they're not like that. They're vectorized shapes that were glowing on the hull of this thing. And the man got close enough to touch it and to photograph it. And after he touched it, he wrote down his observations. He literally took notes on the scene of the markings on the craft. He said he expected to see USAF on it somehow, or none of that being present. He touched it. It was warm. After he touched it, there was a flash of light. I just watched an interview with him today. And this thing went up into the trees and took off at a high rate of speed, of which the likes they'd never seen before.
And, of course, the joke for us is that anytime a skeptic or skeptibunker would be on, like, Larry King or something, they'd say, well, you saw a lighthouse.
Yeah.
And, of course, you can't touch a lighthouse.
Yeah.
Or you can, I suppose, but you would know it.
Not from that kind of distance. I don't think Mr. Penniston's hands are quite that long.
So that's basically it. And this was over a span of, 3 days?
Yeah, there was 3 different nights where phenomena was observed. The landed thing was first, and then there were other things that came after that. There were sightings of smaller lights that were throwing down pencil beams of light that I guess these days we call a laser, but I'm not sure that's what they were, considering the last interview I heard with Colonel Halt, he said that these things were a matter of inches across when they hit the ground. So nonetheless, I mean, he said it looked like they were searching for something, like they were spread out in a grid pattern, and they're throwing beams down all over the base, all over the woods, surrounding areas. They saw a red light that seemed to look like an eye that was weaving in between the trees. This is down on their level. This is not up in the sky. This thing went over to near a farmhouse and exploded into lots of little white lights. I mean, this is some really bizarre stuff. It definitely, to me, has always had the earmarks of being a little more than a UFO thing. Like, this speaks to the real high weird stuff to me, which is one of the reasons I thought this is interesting. And these guys are obviously willing to go out and give you the whole story, no matter how bizarre it might sound. And so, yeah, it was a lot of weirdness. And this was, fairly well documented at the time, I would say, at least to me. Audio recordings and all of that.
So now cut to the 30th anniversary of this thing, and suddenly, mysteriously, there's more.
Yeah.
And it is what?
Well, it is binary codes. It is, allegedly from Jim Penniston, when he touched the craft, he doesn't, I guess he's, from what I've heard and what I've read that he's written, he doesn't prefer the term telepathic. There was nothing telepathic about it. It was more, when he touched it, there was a technology essentially that communicated or implanted these binary codes in his mind. And again, allegedly he wrote these codes down after the sighting because he could picture them perfectly in his mind. He could literally copy them down, and so he did. And so these binary codes were decoded, 6 pages. And allegedly there's more. But what they got out of these binary codes were words. And those words said, exploration of humanity, 5209, 42.532 north, 1312.69 west, continuous for planetary advance. And those coordinate numbers are latitude and longitude. And those latitude and longitudes come up, off the coast of Great Britain in a mythical island called Hy Brasil, Hybrasil. And, interestingly enough, go over to Wikipedia, look up that Hy Brasil, and you find out that this is kind of a mythical island that featured in a lot of Irish myths. It was said to be cloaked in mist, except for one day each 7 years when it became visible, but it still couldn't be reached. kind of similar to St. Brendan's Island. The names Brazil and High Brazil are thought to come from the Irish U Brazil, et cetera, et cetera. This is all very steeped in mythology. I mean, these people that lived on this place were, on this island, were said to be greatly advanced from everybody else on the mainland, more or less kept to themselves, did not travel inland that I'm aware of from what I've read today. But it's a mythical island. And so what do you make of that? And my thing was, well, we're just getting this now at the 30th anniversary. Why didn't we get this back then? If everything else was on the table, why not this? And so I guess that leads us into Angelia's interview.
And we tried to get Angela on, but she has actually left ufology and left her show.
Right.
She may be back, she may not. She hasn't decided, but she definitely said she wants this time off. But, of course, she gave us permission to use her episode. And I guess we'd wanted to interview Penniston, of course. And at first, he was sort of dabbling with the idea, right? In emails with you? Is this correct?
Yeah, I contacted him on Facebook, and this was right before they were going over to the UK to do their talks. And he said, it's getting kind of crazy, but, when all that's over, send me another email in a couple of weeks. And so I did. And since that point, which has been over a period of, I guess, a month or somewhere around there, he has not replied at all. Today on Facebook, I saw where he was active and posting, and I posted in the thread and I said, Jim, just by the way, talked to you about the show before, would like to get you on soon. And I figured if nothing else, he'll see that, and then maybe he'd check his messages on Facebook. And he posted after that, and to my knowledge, at this point in time, has not replied to me.
So there you go. Well, but what's interesting is, so we wanted to have him on to talk about all this, but you, wanting more information about all this, of course, started listening to interviews with him, and you came upon the Joiner report.
Right.
And I haven't heard this yet. I'm going to listen to it for the first time as we go along here. But you had indicated to me that you thought that this was a really important one and probably slipped under most people's radars. And so it would behoove us to bring it to people's attention. Mm-hmm. So kudos to Angelia Joiner.
Yes, thanks to her.
Bunch of reporting or investigative journalism that it impressed you enough to want to do this show, and thank her for letting us use the material to do it. And I guess we'll find out why as we go. So without further ado, let's get into the Joiner report with Jim Penniston.
After 30 years, a Rendlesham reunion was held the end of December last year. And that wasn't that long ago. And these men and others spoke to a crowd of about 400 people. All of the proceeds benefited a children's organization, which I thought was just great. Participants returned to the site where they saw an unexplained craft on the ground in the shape of a triangle with a surface comparable to black onyx. Linda Howe accompanied them, and detailed reports can be found on her site, earthfiles.com. Many consider this incident the most well-documented UFO sighting in history, at least in the top 3. Jim released some new information regarding the incident at the reunion. He had touched the symbols on the craft 30 years before, and this is well known. What was not known is that when he did so, he received a sort of telepathic download in his mind, images of ones and zeros, pictures in his mind that didn't go away until he wrote them down later at his home in the now infamous notebook he carried at the time. I believe he said he didn't get relief from that mental picture in his mind until he did write them down, and then it went away. Linda had the binary code deciphered by Dr. Horace R. Drew and Dr. Mike Reed on November 11th, 2010. These were scientists that she had worked with before. They determined the translation as follows: exploration of humanity, break, something's unclear, then 8100, break, then longitude and latitude coordinates, another break for planetary advance. And it looks like they added the E in advance. It looks like it didn't come through exactly right. And then more of the supposed message is not clear. Jim, up until today, I suppose, released only a portion of the binary code for evaluation. The information was recently aired on the last episode of the History Channel's Ancient Aliens. So there's been some controversy over where the locations are. And for now, I would like to welcome Jim as my guest. He's been through a lot of personal turmoil over the years, which I'm sure that John and some of the other witnesses have also. But, Jim, I respect your courage, and I'm both humbled and grateful that you chose to come on the Joiner Report tonight for your first interview since releasing the information last December. I appreciate you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Angela. I'm really looking forward to tonight. It is the first radio show that we've done since the reunion. And it's unfortunate John can't be on. He has bronchitis. I mean, he said he'd be coughing too much to try to talk. So,
well, I understand several of you came back sick from the UK, right?
Well, Linda, she was sick. I was. A couple other people. Yeah, it was bad. We're not sure if we had some kind of flu or what. It was horrible.
Well, I think the first thing we need to clarify here, Jim, is people have been asking about the timeline. They're not sure when, after you received the code on the 26th, did you write it down in your notebook at home? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I wrote it down on the 27th, the following day.
All right. And was that before your superiors gave you the sodium pentothal to interview you?
No, the sodium pentothal. Okay, here's the timeline. After the 26th, we were the morning of 26th. That's when we went and I've obtained the plaster Paris impressions.
Okay, the plaster Paris impressions that he's speaking of here are from the landed craft the night before, and this was said to be on a three-legged tripod sort of apparatus. So just so everybody's aware, there were impressions taken of those landing spots, and those landing spots were actually measured out, the whole bit documented. So again, we're solid so far.
Then I went home. The following day, I did write these down for more relief than anything else, the codes. And then on the 28th, which was a Monday, I was told to report to the AFOSI building, which I did do. And there I just wrote a formal statement. I wrote a 4-page statement saying exactly what happened out there. And they said that the whole incident would go away that morning if I told them everything, which I did. And then after that, John and I were also instructed to go up to Colonel Halt's office at the base commander's office. We met Colonel Halt up there, and then we got debriefed. We wrote some statements up there, met with the wing commander, base commander. Then let me just jump ahead to answer the question. A month later, around February 5th, 6th, 7th, something like that, that was the other visit to the OSI building where sodium pentothal was actually given to me.
Okay, so it was a month later where you did the interview under the influence of sodium pentothal. But still, if you wrote this down, your binary code, you wrote it down on the 27th at home, that was before your first interview at the AFOSI building?
That's correct. And before
right.
I was interviewed by the base commander or Colonel Halt or... Yeah.
And you have described it as a mental picture in your mind, isn't that right?
That's correct.
And it was something that was constantly coming back to you and kind of just like you couldn't get rid of it, and so you decided to write it down?
Yeah, it's really a very weird situation. Matter of fact, I was actually concerned about myself. Like on the morning of 26, I'd done that stuff out there with the plaster of Paris. I come back, I slept maybe for 4 or 5 hours, got back up. I got these symbols running around my head. I mean, it just seems insane, especially after the experience that we had the night before. I couldn't even get them out of my mind. It was terrible. And so I felt driven. I felt driven to write them down. And I thought for some reason it might help. And actually, I wasn't sure about my stability at the time either. And so I did start writing them down. I grabbed my notebook because I was previously looking at the actual glyphs and stuff. And that's when I decided to go ahead and write them down. So I just used the notebook. And I just started recording them and continued to do that. And I don't know, I can't remember how many pages.
You still there? I don't know if you guys can hear him. I can't hear him.
Shows he's still on with us.
You can hear him?
No.
We lost him. Somehow.
Let's see if we can get him back. It might be a Skype issue.
Where are you, Jim?
Okay, folks, we have a little technical difficulty here. Looks like Skype has dropped Jim out of our link here. Oh, I'm looking in the chat room. If you are not familiar with the chat room, come on over to InceptionRadioNetwork.com and join us. We have a great time in the chat room.
And
Jim
no
should be
guest.
back.
Good save, Angela.
All right. All right. Sorry about that, Jim.
Oh. Okay. Well, you never know what's going to go ahead and chop the line up, huh?
Isn't that right? Okay. So you want to continue with your thought there? Or?
Well, I was just chatting away, Angela. I think I left off at the part about once I had the codes written down then I just felt relieved that it went away. But then you have to look at my state of mind at the time. I was thinking, my God, what is wrong with me? Why would I have to write something like that down? And then I was wondering, you know what? I don't know if it's just gibberish. I don't know if it was just something from the aftershock of what had happened the night before.
Right.
Was I having some kind of post-traumatic stress from it? I was pretty concerned about that, but it seemed to help. So once they were written down, the visual went away. So it seemed okay.
Did the AFOSI have access to your notebook at any time?
No. Matter of fact, they never even asked for it. They didn't know I had one. But it's pretty standard security procedures for the security force supervisors carry notebooks for our recording our shift activities. If we have a situation that happens, aircraft crash, something like that, in-flight emergencies, whatever it may be, we record, those particular times down when stuff happened and that. So when we go to do further reports, we can do accurate 1569s, which is the Air Force incident report. We can write them out in more detail. I mean, it's just normal procedure that we just did that. I carried my notebook everywhere. But when I was at OSI, there's no need to pull my notebook out. It just happened a couple of days before.
Okay.
I mean, it was very fresh.
Right. I understand that.
So, Jared, let me ask you something. Like, at that point, doesn't that seem a little weird to you? That OSI would not ask him for any materials he may have written down when it's standard procedure for these guys to carry around a notebook, and for the simple fact that he mentions an aircraft fire or an aircraft crash, rather, and this is to write down details of an event of some sort like that, and that is exactly what they thought that it was that night in the woods, that probably an airplane had crashed. You don't think OSI is going to go, Penniston, you got anything written down anywhere? You got what do you got? Doesn't that strike you as a little weird?
It's a little weird. I guess it strikes me a little weird that he hasn't thought it was weird, and no one else involved in this case has said anything about that being weird.
I mean, that just seems... Something seems not right about that to me. Like, I would think if they thought something happened of some extreme significance that ought to be hushed up and kept quiet, guess what? They're going to go through his house or his room or whatever, and they're going to look for whatever may be there. I mean, they don't have any idea what he may have written down, sketched, drawn, whatever. I don't know. When I first heard that, I thought that was a little strange.
Well, they get them to spill what they know using sodium pentothal, right?
Yeah.
So you would think that anyone going to those lengths would indeed ask what they jotted down in their notebooks that night.
Yeah.
I think that's a safe bet.
Yeah. In which case they would want those notebooks. We're not letting you leave here without those notebooks. I mean, that would kind of be, I don't know, to me that just seems like that would be a standard thing to do. To confiscate all of that. Confiscate the photographs, confiscate anything you've written down, recordings, whatever. But we don't get that here. So I thought that was a little strange.
Carrying on.
You kept this information about the telepathic download of the binary code to yourself until October 2010 when Linda was interviewing you for the History Channel episode. Is that right?
No, that's not true.
Okay.
The whole code system came out in a September 1994 hypnosis.
Yeah.
So that was described there.
But it wasn't made public?
No, never made public. I mean, I talked about receiving codes in that before, but no one's ever asked about it.
How would anyone have asked about it if it wasn't public knowledge?
Right.
But I would think that if he had said publicly, I received some codes, that people then would ask about it.
Somebody would, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think so.
Okay. Is he really saying that he said everything under the influence of sodium pentothal?
Right. Mm-hmm.
He was interviewed and asked about everything.
Right.
And he was able to not mention this binary code way back then? Even under the influence of sodium pentothal, he was able to keep this information secret.
Yeah, I suppose that's it, right?
I mean, he's not saying he kept it secret from the public. He's saying he kept it secret, period.
Yeah, nobody knew about it, apparently.
All right, and that was...
the first time we were out filming for the Ancient Alien series in October, and when, of course, they wanted to see the notebook and see the glyphs and stuff in it, and I was showing the film crew and stuff that, and what's all this other stuff? And all those are the binary code that was given to me. And it seemed to stop the whole shoot. They're going, "You're kidding me." I went, "No." I says, "Well, how long you had that?" I said, "Well, from the time of the incident." They
well,
said,
I can understand in a way why I understand why, for sure, not in a way, why you would wait until after your retirement in 1993 to do the hypnosis. I mean, you had a job to do and family and all of that, but I'm surprised that Linda, in 1994, you said nobody ever asked you about the binary code, that she wouldn't have jumped all over that.
You wanted to say something?
Hypnosis.
Moving on.
Hypnosis.
Linda and I did a project, let's see, I believe it was 1996. And that project, she did it was Glimpses of Alternate Realities. It was another book that she did. In there is actually the transcript of my hypnosis, that portion, describing time travel and also the binary codes that were received. So they've been on record in a book form since 96.
And Linda never approached anybody since 1994 to have it decoded until this interview in October for Ancient Aliens, right?
That's correct.
And that really surprises me.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what's in her mind. What she told what happened at the shoot is that they said, well, we should get those. The film people were saying we should get those decoded in that Prometheus. And I said, that's the film company. I said, yeah. I said, we could. I said, but it's probably just gibberish, you know. And I said, well, let's find out. And so I ran it to with the film company, and then I gave a second one for independent review with Linda. That was my suggestion. And she ran it to those two other doctors. And, of course, there's some discrepancy besides Linda's site and what the Prometheus did. But it's minor. And so, yeah, I don't know, have no idea why she didn't pursue it earlier. She knew about it. She knew about it for 15, 16 years beforehand.
All right. Now, did you ever tell John about it, or did he just recently learn about it?
John knew about it somewhat. I mean, he never seen the actual coding of it, no, at the time.
So let me stop it here because I'm already confused about this binary code. There's 12 pages of binary code, correct?
Okay.
Right? There's 12 pages of this binary code.
Yeah.
Some of it's been decoded, some of it hasn't.
Right.
Is he saying he's known about this 12 pages of binary code since the beginning, or is he saying that he only recovered it under hypnosis in 1994? I mean,
No,
he must have known something, obviously, to have gone under hypnosis in the first place.
No, he wrote them down the day after because they were aggravating him. The message was like, you know, a song stuck in his head kind of thing, I'm guessing. It's the way he describes it there, that the next day he wrote them down, you know, to get him to stop, to get it, the mental image, I suppose, or the replay of these numbers out of his head. The only way to stop it was to write them down. So that was the day after he says he wrote them down.
So what was the hypnosis about? Why was that mentioned?
I don't know.
Okay, so that's frustration number one. Frustration number two is the binary code. Now, this is the same thing. If I recall, there was that crop circle, right, with the meticulous gray alien holding a disc. Mm-hmm. That was the sort of dots and dashes on the disc. That was binary code, right?
I believe so.
And somebody had decoded it and blah blah blah. Well, that was done. That was when was that made in comparison to this? I mean, because clearly someone like Linda Moulton Howe at least would have known what binary code was, right? In 94 or 96. Yeah,
the alien face formation, which is the one that you're talking about, where it's a disc. It actually looks like a photograph. It's that clear of an image in the fields, and there's a disc that kind of breaks the border of what you would consider the three-dimensional picture of the alien, and in that disc is a binary code. That's 2002, and Colin's friend Paul Vigay is the one who essentially wrote a preliminary look at the 2002 alien face formation, and in there is all sorts of information about, you know, the disc, the photographic depiction of this alien, and how it kind of resembled a somatic diagram of some sort.
When did binary code? Well, then okay, so I'm wrong in that. But then, at what point does binary code become well known enough to where someone, Penniston, Linda Moulton Howe, somebody looks at that because he already had looked at it and thought it was a code, right?
Well,
so
some sort.
Did you look at it and go, okay, it's binary code? I mean, when did the digital age? I mean, I remember talking about this stuff, ones and zeros, right? That's what the binary code is, right? Ones and zeros.
Correct. Yes.
I mean, I remember talking about that when CDs first came out.
Uh-huh.
And that was...
Well, you want a little history on binary code?
That was long before 96.
Well, here's the thing. Binary numbers were first described or written by a guy named Pingala in 100 BC.
Yeah, but they didn't become common knowledge until like 87.
Binary code was first introduced by the German mathematician Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz in the 17th century. And he was trying to find a system that can convert logic's verbal statements into pure mathematical one. And after that idea was ignored, he came across the Chinese text called the I Ching, which used a type of binary system code. So at what point does it enter into computing? I don't know. I mean, there's been forms of binary code. I mean, Braille is a form of binary code, or a type, rather.
But he said he knew it was a code, right? He's sort of known it was a code all along.
Yes.
He just didn't know what it meant and didn't bother with it. Well, if you know that you've got a code from a seemingly other intelligence, you don't bring that to anyone's attention?
Yeah, see, this is where,
including under sodium pentothal. You didn't think maybe that was an important thing to note?
Yeah. Well, when we had Dr. David Clark on, this is one of the things I mentioned to him that I found to be really disappointing. This is the beginning of my sideways glance at Rendlesham, and I, previously thought this was a really, really good case and a lot of solid information from what seemed like really stand-up guys. And then all of a sudden we get this binary code that is all of a sudden surfacing, and this just wasn't something that didn't come up. I mean, this didn't come up before. It conveniently comes out in the mass, sense at the 30th anniversary thing. Like, that seems a little too convenient to me. Like, I don't know how I feel about that at that point. I don't know. I don't know how anybody can't look at that and go, that's binary code. And if I got that from touching this, then I should be talking about this. This is part of the story. I don't know.
At least telling your military officials, right?
Well, yeah.
I mean, there's got to be some sense of duty involved with a message from the great other. Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the things, I want everybody to keep this in the back of your head for now, but what he just mentioned was about John Burroughs was aware of the binary code. Just keep that in the back of your head for me, and we'll move on.
Well, what did he say? That John Burroughs was aware?
That John Burroughs was aware of the binary code.
Not the whole time.
Not the whole time, but it doesn't sound to me, by the way he said it, doesn't sound to me like he just found out about this recently.
Right.
Here's an odd thing with John and I. John and I, since 1980, out with the exception of the last 8 months, never met, talked, or anything about the incident. We were purposely kept apart by over the years. I was told by actually Colonel Halt that John was unable to get a hold of him. He had dropped off the face of the planet, and there was just no way to find John for any of the film work we were going to do or anything like that. We did end up doing a project in 1996 together, I think it was, over in England, and John was there, but we were kept apart. I was with Colonel Hall all the time. I didn't get to spend any time with John. So that was the last time I seen him until I got a phone call approximately about 12 months ago, and it was John. He found me, and he says, Jim, he says, John, he says, I said, oh, how you been? I've been trying to get a hold of you. And John says, you know what we need to do? And I says, yeah, go back to Rendlesham. He goes, you're right. So that's how it started 12 months ago.
Now, you said you two were purposely kept apart.
Correct.
By Colonel Halt?
He's part of it, yes. It was
Who else? Who else was part of it?
Well, during the hypnosis session, one of the things that is with the false memories that were given, one of the things that they told me during hypnosis, and what came out during hypnosis, is that whatever happens, John and I can't get back together again because we'll figure it out. That came out in the hypnosis for the 94 session. So believing that, I think that's exactly what happened, because when we had to return to Rendlesham, guess what we did? We figured it out. So
what did you figure out?
We figured out the exact landing site, for example, which was distorted before. I mean, 30 years of people running around to the wrong areas, and the forestry department putting up signs to places that they thought was where it was at. And So we found the exact landing location. I had total recall there. John and I had some other experiences together that we are keeping private. And also it answered many questions, and it gave us more direction on what we had to do. And it also told us that Rendlesham, the return, was a beginning. And there's much more that's got to happen.
You learned that Rendlesham was the beginning. Did I understand you correctly?
That's correct.
The beginning of what?
Beginning of what John and I need to do over the course of history here. We're not done with this. We have other codes. We have other things that we have to get deciphered. We're sure we have more information. We're a little hesitant right now about the full release because the way stuff was handled with the 6 pages that we just arbitrarily grabbed. I grabbed 6 pages out. That's what we used.
Yeah, I was wondering, why didn't you give them all of it at one time? Why would you just pick 6 pages? And are those 6 pages the first 6 pages? Are they in sequence?
Yeah, in sequence, the first 6 pages. And I just grabbed them because, first of all, I just thought they were gibberish. I didn't think they were going to say anything. I mean, who in the world can write down ones and zeros and ones and do 14 pages of it and then mean anything? I mean, that's impossible. So I was pretty sure it was all gibberish.
Jeff, I believe you wanted to say something.
14 pages, and you give up 6. If you've got something, I mean, this is where I have the problem with all of this stuff. I mean, this routinely happens in ufology, is that somebody's got data, and what they say is truthful data, honestly recalled from the event. Why isn't it on the table? What is with this withholding? I'm withholding, or we're keeping that quiet for now. What is with that? If you've got an event that has happened to you, and there it is in front of you, you know, unless the goddamn beings are beside you saying, keep your damn mouth shut, which I don't know, maybe that's the case, but why wouldn't you just lay it all out on the table if you've got evidence like that? I could understand if it was you were told something or something conveyed information to you telepathically, and you don't want to talk about it. I can understand that. But when you've written down binary code that supports your story, and it happened at the event, you've written this down, I mean, that's data every bit as good as any other, as you know, the alleged radiation and the depressions in the ground and Halt and all of the other people witnessing this stuff. I mean, you're withholding that? Why are you withholding that? I would love to ask him this. Like, what's the purpose in that? We don't like the way it was handled the first time. Well, what makes you think releasing it any other way is going to make it less mishandled? This is when you put something in the public view, that's what happens. It gets mishandled. So I fail to understand that.
So 14 pages, not 12 pages.
Correct. Now it's 14, yeah.
And of those 6 pages of ones and zeros, the message that they deciphered was about a haiku length? I mean,
well, there was from when I first saw it put out on the net, there was, see, it's weird because parts of it are decipherable and then parts of it are not, or don't seem, it says unintelligible or, something like that. And it seems to me parts like Angela mentioned in the beginning, there are things in parentheses that are, I'm assuming, are inserted for readability. Well, I don't think you can do that. I don't think that you can do that. That something seems not right about that you're possibly, okay, well, they mean this. Let's not do that. Let's just read it for how it is. And if it's unintelligible, it's unintelligible. In which case, does it mean anything? In which case, are we going to try to decode it as language? Or should we be trying to decode this as image? There's an interesting thing about that because binary code can also work visually. So should we be trying to run this through something that can spit out some kind of possible image if it's, God knows, I mean, who knows what that could be? Should we be trying to figure out this in a verbal language? I don't know.
The other thing he's saying here is They had some other experiences, and he also had total recall, whatever that means.
Right.
Of what, I don't know. So he has total recall, and they had some other experiences that he's not sharing. Right. And they have some future work to do. So all of this is a setup to be around for a long time.
For more, right. Well, it's for more, yeah. Yeah, there'll be more.
Here's more now.
But you knew that it was code.
I knew it was code because that's the impression that was left with me at the contact site.
And the other impression that you got when you touched the glyphs was that the craft was in some sort of repair mode, right?
No, I had an impression that it wasn't in the exact location it was supposed to be.
Okay.
Which is different than repair mode. I mean,
okay.
Its contact was done on purpose and with John and I. I mean, it's evident for that. Yeah, but it wasn't supposed to be exactly right there, which some of the coding is now showing the exact location.
Where was it supposed to be, do you think?
Brazil.
High Brazil. You think it was? Now, I looked at Linda's site, and the longitude, latitude coordinates in the code that you put down, there isn't a code that depicts where the decimal point should go. And she made a little chart in there that without knowing where the decimal point goes, it could be in one of like 24 locations.
Yeah, probably.
And you had earlier said that you felt that Woodbridge was the correct location and that Ancient Aliens had it wrong. So now you've changed your mind?
No, I've actually felt that maybe it wasn't a good idea that Ancient Aliens, that site became known, and I talked over John, and we said, well, since it is correct, we might as well not try to deny it and let the information lay like it is.
Why would you deny it anyway?
Because we started doubting things to ourselves. Why was it the contact was only given to us, the information? It wasn't broadcast on national world radio or anything like that. So we figured, well, is this information releasable? Did they want it that way? And so this was going through our minds, and I actually thought it would be harmful if they actually knew the location of High Brazil.
Who actually knew the location? The government?
The world. Everybody.
The world.
Anyway, it's not really, it wasn't given to everybody in the world, was it? It was given to me.
Well, and since you brought this up, I do have a question from someone you know, I think Ronnie Dugdale, who attended the reunion event, and he says he's a friend of yours.
He sure is.
He read your post today on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And you announced that you realized the importance of the binary code there, and the rest of the dozen or so pages are being deciphered now. I assume you gave those to Linda, the rest of them?
No.
Who did you give them to?
I'm not going to release that.
Well, why?
Because of security.
Okay. So you didn't give them just copies?
The information is being looked at by experts.
All right.
What I will do for skeptics, I'll take the 6 pages that are now everywhere in the world that have been published. Those 6 pages, I will actually do authentication on the notebook that can tell that for some reason, I guess people doubt it. I don't care why. I don't care about that. But to satisfy a few people, I guess I will go this step. We'll get the page dated and the ink dated for the year it was written. But that's as far as I'm going to go with it.
Yeah, I knew there were some naysayers, saying that should be tested. It could have been added later for this reunion, and I wondered how you would respond to that.
Well, that's what I'll do, because let's face it, Angela, this is how it's going to work. I go ahead and get it authenticated by experts that this is 1980 document. The ink is from 1980, and now they'll find something else they want to use as
right.
There's always something else.
There is.
It's just like when we got to Woodbridge that we put that lighthouse thing, that ridiculous thing about lighthouse to bed. Someone made a career off that, by the way, a skeptic. And so we put that to bed. So what does the BBC put out? They have a interview over there, and now they said it's an Apollo spacecraft and a helicopter. Okay, that one's even more ridiculous. I mean, I don't know why they're trying to the evidence is clear.
Jeremy, who's deciphering the binary code?
Can't tell you for security reasons.
Top men.
Can't tell you. Top men.
Top men. Yeah, I mean, so there to me is another big problem. Number one, we don't know who's doing it. Chances are, and I'm guessing here, but I don't know for sure, I'm guessing this is someone Linda Moulton Howe is hooked up with. And so, doesn't anybody find that to be a problem? I mean, not that I'm not saying anything about her trustability, but it's like, can't we take this outside of a UFO circle in some way? Like, couldn't Jim have taken this to somebody, I don't know, any number of computer experts out there to this try and decipher binary code? I mean, do we have to always go through a ufologist to do that? That seems problematic to me, because a ufologist is always going to try and find something, ufologically related, or something that, I mean, we've seen this time after time with all sorts of evidence. We'll keep going from one expert to another until we get the answer we want. That to me just seems kind of iffy. I don't know that I would buy anything that.
This whole segment is disgusting. I mean, I wonder, is Angela just sitting there going, "Oh no"?
Yeah, well, yeah, probably. Yeah,
I mean, you're going to bring your notebook to someone who's going to tell you that the pen and paper were from 1983. That's going to happen?
No, I doubt it.
It's not going to happen.
No. I mean,
I don't. Cost, and is it even possible?
I'll put it to you this way: yeah, you can date paper, sure, but do I have any doubt that this is written in the notebook that he used that night? Oh yeah, I believe that. I can totally believe that. Yes. Are you going to date the ink? I suppose you could, if you wanted to spend that kind of money to get ink, tested in that way to say. But does that prove when it was written? No, that doesn't prove anything. Nothing. I mean, for all we know, that book was in a drawer and had the pen stuck in the back of it. So what does that prove? I mean, that doesn't do anything. So any skeptic saying, well, I want to make sure that paper and that pen is dated, that doesn't prove anything. And I don't think, honestly, that's going to appease anybody if he gets it, goes off and spends all this money, to have that tested. I just think that's ridiculous.
All right. Shall we continue?
Yes, let's.
You would have heard a helicopter.
Yeah, you think 160 Air Force security force members would know what a helicopter sounded like?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Especially when they're stationed there.
But anyway, in this in your Facebook post today, and I quote, "These codes are truly unique and were given by travelers through time. They tell us of a probe which was sent to planet Earth on December 26, 1980. Its mission to record the past and to document all that was done, further to instruct us on the events which will occur." Now, Ronnie said in a previous correspondence with you, you told him that the binary code was a message sent for a few intended and not for all of humanity. And this was the reason you felt at the time you could not share its content. So,
yes,
Ronnie,
John, right?
So Ronnie asks, Why, if the message is not meant for all, would you bother to say anything about that part of the message? And how could you make this determination if you didn't know what the code was saying and the last pages are just now being deciphered? Did you receive some other telepathic message that suggested to you not to share it?
I knew what those 6 pages said before they were deciphered. Yes.
You did?
Yes.
Then my question for you would be, if it was intended to land at High Brazil, which is out in the sea, and it's some mythical undersea island, sort of like a lost Atlantis, is my understanding. Why did you get the code? It's in the wrong spot. Who would have gotten it under the water? What's going on with that?
Well, obviously I can't walk on water, so they got me at the nearest vortex location, which is a high EM in that area. So I think that's why they were attracted to that area.
Jeff, come on. What are we doing? I'm calling bullshit on this whole thing. What is this? These are the same guys that went on Larry King and presented a coherent, rational, here's what we saw, here's everything we know. You know, you can't really debunk this because it's not a lighthouse. We're trustworthy army men. We know the difference between this, that, and the other thing. This is the same set of people?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is insane. This is like he went off his meds or something.
No, I see, and here's what's really disappointing. I mean, this is what's really disappointing. When I heard this interview and when I've heard, different things about the net when I was leading up to listening to this, I was just like, oh no. It's amazing to me that, first of all, that the binary codes are just coming out. I mean, they're just coming out. That's problem number one. Problem number two, I knew what they said anyway. I knew what they said before they were decoded. And let me tell you where my problem lies with this. And here's where we're going to play you something else. And this is not Angelia Joiner's interview. This bit of audio is coming off of YouTube. And this YouTube film was shot at the 30th anniversary discussion over there in the UK. And I'm going to read this description right off of the YouTube where this is posted. The username attached to this, who we should thank, is LCDVASRM. So thank you, sir, which I'm sorry I can't pronounce your YouTube handle, but that's where it's coming from. And this was filmed at the occasion of the 30th anniversary of the Rendlesham Forest Incident. James Penniston responds to the question, how could you keep this unknown, I'm assuming binary code, this unknown from others so long before you finally decided to expose these 12 pages, now it's 12 pages that this man has put out, of binary code. And it says, this video is released under the licensed Creative Commons attribution, non-commercial, so on and so forth. And we have attributed it to LCDVASRM. Now, in this audio, this very astute person in the audience says, how do you keep this quiet? How do you petition the government that you want the truth about this, but yet you're withholding data from your very own sighting? And how could you do this? How could you not open your mouth? Now, he asked this to Mr. Burroughs. And listen to what Mr. Burroughs says, and keep in mind what I told you all to remember that Jim just said about Burroughs and that he knew about the binary code. And so let's listen to this audio real quickly, and we'll come back.
I understand that if a government doesn't understand something, they're going to squash it, they're going to hide it. But if you've got 12 pages of binary codes, and you're going to sit on that for 30 years and not think that's relevant of some way, you only sort of realise this, 10 months ago or whatever. I just can't. 12 pages. 12 pages is a lot to sit on for 30 years. And then you point fingers at the government for covering up stuff they don't understand. I just can't say. But then to come and say 29 years later, you've got 12 pages of binary codes.
I mean, he's going to come out this. I'll deal with this, but I will say this. That's a fair question, and I'm gonna, when he comes up, I'm sure he'll say some more about it. But I didn't know about these codes, okay? And I can't explain what.
You can't tell me that 29 years you don't think it would mean something. 12 pages. It was just like one line. 12 pages. It's right here.
He's right there.
And you're saying you're only getting them deciphered now. My curiosity, I would have taken it to some university or something and got it deciphered way before now.
What?
12 pages of download is a lot.
It didn't mean nothing to me. It didn't mean nothing to me. So I, it's been...
Sorry, when you said that they looked at 5 pages or 8 pages of reports,
Put yourself in my head.
they'd seen the binary code.
Put yourself in my head on this one. You're out, you have contact with a craft down on origin. Bright lights. A triangular craft appears. Think about this one.
But surely,
Okay, you've already seen the most awesome thing you could probably see.
bloody hell, this must mean something.
No, actually, it was because of John. I don't think I would have done nothing with it. Honestly. It just wasn't important.
So right there, we have a guy in the audience saying, 30 years later, we're getting this? Why not before? And Jim's answer was, because it didn't mean anything. You understand? It didn't mean anything to me. The guy says, why didn't you have this? Why didn't you take this to be deciphered by someone? And the guy, and Penniston says, why? But yet, he knew, according to this interview with Angela, he knew what they were. He knew about them. He knew what they were. They obviously meant something. They were important. So there is the real reason that I wanted to point this whole show out in this direction. I mean, we can take off from here and listen to little bits and bobs of Angela's show from here on out. But here's the real problem. They didn't mean anything. And we're going to provide the link to this gentleman's video on YouTube for you all to watch. And please note body language. Please note the look on the face. Please note how after that question is asked, he says, just to put yourself in my shoes. You've just seen triangular craft, unknown origin. It appears and blah, blah, blah. And that's not answering the question. It's more, it's like, you got to put yourself in my shoes. No, you just said they didn't mean anything to you. And now on an interview with Angela, you're saying you knew what they were before they were even deciphered. So clearly they weren't gibberish, right?
Well, yeah, you're saying look at the body language. And I got to tell you, that was the first thing I said to you was just looking at the way this guy is answering him. He's looking around, he's like waving to people in the audience.
Well, no, that's Burroughs that does that. Burroughs is the guy who waves to somebody.
Right. But the two of them, I'm saying the two of them combined, it reminded me, I'd said to you, reminded me of the Pickering brothers. Sean and Clay Pickering, who, tried to scam everyone with, some military, insider knowledge, blah, 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 and it ended up being some bondage dominatrix guy or so,
Okay.
You remember that?
Yeah, I didn't follow it, but whatever. That's fine.
Yeah. And they got caught because they were coming to you live from a secret hush-hush UN meeting that somebody recognized from, I believe, the iPhone image as the local YMCA.
Uh-oh. Jeez.
Busted. Yeah. So, but in any event, I talked to them on a number of occasions, live and in person, and they have the exact same body language as these two people.
Really?
Like completely that odd guarded, aloof, I don't really care about what you have to say to me,
right.
Holier than thou, bullshit artist attitude.
Well, I've stopped this video because we were reviewing it right before, we were deciding where to stop this. You all watch the whole thing and you can hear the whole conversation, but I've stopped it here at 2 minutes and 34 seconds, which is where our audio actually stopped in following this. The video is actually 6 minutes and 3 seconds. I encourage everyone, watch the whole thing. but I've got it stopped here at 2:34, and I'm guessing that behind Mr. Penniston on the right, I'm guessing, is that Peter Robbins that's up there beside of Linda Moulton Howe? Okay. And Linda Moulton Howe, looking at both their faces, they show grave concern. I mean, this looks like, uh-oh. But clearly, a lot of people in the audience, by virtue of them clapping after the question was asked, were all thinking the same thing. Why now? And his answer is, because it didn't mean anything to me. I didn't mean anything. But we're getting a much different answer when Angelia Joiner asked that question. And by what he's offering on her show to her as well. I mean, we're getting a much different attitude towards this binary code stuff. All of a sudden now I knew what it was, and I've always known, and I knew before it was even deciphered what it said. And what? And this is why I wanted to point this out, because I don't think enough people paid attention to Angela's episode with this, and this needs to reach a lot of people, because here's the big question. This is a huge hole, huge, and nobody's really talking about it. I mean, this whole double speak on this thing, and why didn't you come out with it? Why didn't you just say something like, because I thought it would hurt my career? And I think at some point he does say that. That I thought this would really hurt my career. And you know what? I could understand that to a degree. But, of course...
if you pay close attention, I mean, his friend who asks the question on Facebook gives him an out, gives him a pretty good out, and says, well, if this was just given to you and not for the world, then, then why blah, blah, blah? Is it because they psychically gave you another message? Like, he could have just said, yes. They telepathically gave me another message with the go-ahead.
Right.
But instead, it's this topsy-turvy, stick to the script nonsense, in my opinion, anyway.
Well, it wasn't meant to be there. It wasn't supposed to be there. It was supposed to be in High Brazil. Well,
which I keep thinking is Hyrule from The Legend of Zelda. Every time I hear that.
But, I mean, then Angela asked the greatest question in the world. Well, who the hell would they have been talking to out in the water? How great is she? I mean, that's beautiful. I mean, beautiful. Who would they be talking to out there? Well, I don't know. I guess, they got me close to the land or wherever they could get me. What? What are you talking about? I mean,
to me, this is all about... this is like really bad salesmanship stumbling toward letting us know that there are going to be future revelations.
Yeah.
And this, of course, is the hallmark of all of the nonsense, all of the disinformation stuff that I can think of, from Richard Doty to Serpo to any of that stuff, is you're going to get future revelations. Just hold on. You're going to keep getting a story.
Right. And, well, see, here's where...
So if this isn't bullshit, why is it following the classic ufological bullshit template?
Yeah, well, here's the thing that I had mentioned to you. I said, and this is strictly my opinion and my impression just by watching how some of this stuff is unfolded. And I haven't, to be honest with you, I'll be honest with the audience and everybody else. I read a decent amount about this thing. I watched everything I could get my hands on about Rendlesham throughout the years since it's happened. And I've always gotten the impression that, of course, number one, we all know there's been a certain divide between certain witnesses in this case. Certain witnesses don't want to talk to other ones, or don't associate, or won't do interviews if one or the other is there, and that sort of thing. But throughout the years, watching Penniston kind of tell his account very matter-of-factly, of touching it, of writing down the symbols, of seeing it fly away, and all of that. And now all of a sudden, I don't know, it just feels like this is not the same person. It feels like this is like he knows, or he was told what this is. And now here's your cover, and here's how you follow this, and you follow it by the book. I don't know. I wonder, I don't assume this, but I wonder, were they told what it really was, and now they've got to perpetuate a myth on top of it, and maybe someone's just not a good enough actor and is slipping up, and I don't know. I mean, it just seems strange to me. This doesn't sound or seem like the same guy who recounted his story many times that I've heard in all sorts of media across all the net and the TV and podcasts and all that. He's always been pretty forthcoming. And now all of a sudden there's this guardedness, there's the binary codes, there's the, it didn't mean anything, but I always knew what it meant. And we've got more, and we're trying to decide how to, I mean, all this crap. It's like, oh, come on. What is going on? It could be as simple as, they don't know what it was, and they're embellishing it as time goes on, just like you say, to keep this thing going. It could be that they know, and or they've been told, and now they have to cover some. They have to create a bullshit story around it, so everybody like devalues it and throws it away, or it's true. I mean, I'm not buying any of this because there's too much doublespeak in it to me, but we all know how this shit goes. We know how this thing works and how it can make you look foolish, but I don't know, based on what he's saying, it doesn't seem like the phenomena has made him look foolish. It's like he's made himself look a little foolish to me, at least in my opinion. That's the way it seems. So, I guess some listeners will take this and go, well, I still think there's something there. Maybe they're just trying to release this in a really cohesive way that it's, people can get their heads around it and they get their point across. But, I mean, just listen to this. I mean, just something is not adding up, and it smells bad.
Well, I don't
real
know if
bad.
Did you notice, we sort of let this go, but during this interview with Angela, he tries to throw Charles Halt under the bus a couple of times.
Yeah.
What's that relationship? And Charles Halt always sounded like the guy who knew more than everyone else, and now it looks like he's not in on this part of it.
No, I mean, I just listened to an interview with him last night, and it's still pretty much what he has always said. His account of things doesn't seem to have changed. And all of this with Penniston and Burroughs and maybe a couple other people seem to be the ones who are taking the big center stage right now. I know that Halt has done some media for the 30th and all of that. I don't know what the real relationship is there between all of them. But I do know that he will not go on some interviews if certain people are present in that interview as well. Like he very much wants to keep away from that. So I don't know. We are going to try to get him on the show. And I would still, again, if some way, somehow this gets back to Mr. Penniston, we still want to have him on the show because we want to talk about this stuff. It's not like, we're pointing out what seems or should be obvious to everyone, but we're certainly not going to ban him off the show and say this is all bullshit. We would like to pick his brain and get a little bit more and figure out like what is going on here. Like, what is going on? I don't know. I mean, we can listen to a little bit more of Angela's thing and then and take it from there and just listen to what else comes out in this interview.
What will happen next? To hear the rest of this episode of Paratopia, please visit www.paratopia.net, where you can purchase this single episode for only $1.25. You can also subscribe for only $4.50 per month. Not only will you receive access to full-length podcasts, you'll also receive the Paratopia Quarterly Online Magazine and receive access to the members-only message board where you can discuss the show directly with Jeremy and Jeff. Paid monthly subscriptions are also able to access exclusive future media projects such as films, bonus podcasts, and more. It's all inclusive. Like a resort, with your monthly subscription. Yeah, that's it. Think of it as a resort. We hope you'll join us and enjoy your stay at Paratopia.